Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Teal Talks. My name is Chris. I use she, her pronouns.
And my name is Holly. I also use she, her pronouns.
So, for those of you who might have tuned in previously, you'll notice that I am in my office today, a little bit of a change of scenery. Still have my poor camera quality, but just a different location today. So, anyway, Holly and I wanted to continue our conversations around Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And for those of you who might not know, or for those of you who just need a little bit of a refresher, the topic this Sexual Assault Awareness Month is safe online spaces. So, today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to support the survivors in our lives and the survivors that we might come into contact with, whether digitally or in person.
Yeah. So to start with how to support a survivor, we wanted to start as simple as it is, and that is just to listen to the survivors in your life. And when we're talking about listening, we mean that if someone is discussing their experience with sexual violence, if they are disclosing an experience of assault, then one of the best ways that you can support them is to just simply be there for them, to be that comforting, kind ear, and to simply listen and just do that. And the reason I say just and I say listen is because when we're talking about listening to our survivors, we are not asking someone to be a mental health professional. We're not asking someone to investigate a sexual assault or an occurrence of sexual violence. When someone is disclosing their sexual assault to you, they oftentimes just want someone to be there and listen to them. Obviously, if they are looking, and I shouldn't say obviously, if they are looking for something more, then being a good support might mean pointing them to resources, pointing them to a crisis center like ours so that they can get more professional help, or even helping them if they were to want to report or something, you could support them through that process. But by being a support to them as a friend or a family member, just listening and being there to support them through kindness and warmth is one of the best things that you can do.
So, just as Holly mentioned, we do want to just listen. But with that being said, if we just sit there totally non responsive, that would be super awkward. So, if someone is disclosing an instance of sexual violence to you or sharing their story with you, we certainly don't want to sit there and just say nothing. So, while we listen, we can do something called active listening, which is kind of where we like show body language, different nonverbal cues, and we can say things too. So, here are some examples of things that you might say if somebody discloses an instance of sexual violence to you. So, one of those things could be, thank you for trusting me to share this information with me, or thank you for feeling comfortable enough to share this information with me. Something else you can say is, I'm here to support you, or what can I do to support you right now or through this process? Something else you can say is, I believe you, I'm here for you, and this was not your fault. So, these are some good responses to try out or to use with the people who are disclosing sexual violence to you so that we aren't just sitting there totally nonverbal, stone cold face. But like Holly said, listening is super important. So making sure that we're not dominating the conversation, that we're not talking a whole lot, and that we're just expressing that we're hearing them, we're listening to them, and we are supporting them.
And so, if someone were to disclose to us that they have an experience of sexual violence, something that's super important after we're listening and we are being mindful of how we're responding is to also think about internally how we are kind of responding with our body and our body language and thinking about our own emotions. So, how can you kind of regulate your own reaction and your response in that moment? I think it's really important to recognize that hearing someone's experience with sexual violence can be traumatizing to yourself or it can be really hard to hear. And so, first of all, I think it's okay to take a moment and kind of process that within yourself. Like, this is really hard to hear. I think I need to take a second to register what I'm listening to and kind of think about the facial reactions that I'm using right now, the responses that I'm giving. Obviously, if someone discloses, we wouldn't expect you to stand up and clap. We wouldn't expect you to scream at the person. And we wouldn't really, in an ideal situation, want you to now hysterically cry either. And in a moment like that, it would be okay if the person that's sharing is crying and that brings you to tears too because it's a really hard time, but you want to make sure that you are kind of responding with empathy and compassion in mind as well. So you want to manage your own reaction as best as you can. And with that in mind, hearing someone else's experience with assault can be extremely hard and extremely trying. And so we want to also encourage people to reach out to supports and to services themselves is if this has been really hard to process on your own. So services like rape crisis centers and sexual assault centers also offer their counseling services to individuals who may have been the first person who someone disclosed to. Meaning, if your friend had been assaulted and you now need to process that with someone, you can get services as well just to be able to talk through with someone what your friend or your loved one went through as well, because it's really hard to be that first person as well.
So with that being said, something that's really important, and I think Holly touched a little bit on this earlier about offering resources or maybe doing some of your own research about local rape crisis centers or hotlines or even online like groups and spaces where survivors can talk or connect with other people who have experienced something similar. It's really important that we don't tell a survivor what is right for their healing. So that is a really, really difficult thing. I think sometimes when we hear someone disclose something or they share something like this with us, we immediately want to help fix the issue or provide something to get them help. That's a great thing, but we also need to remember that we don't need to fix people. And it's really, really important that we don't tell that person how to heal or what their healing looks like. So letting them make the decisions about their own healing and what that looks like is really important. So we can definitely find those resources and offer them, maybe give them some information like, hey, I found this hotline or I found this group that you might be interested in, but not pushing them to utilize those resources is really important because they might not be ready to, they might not want them, or they might not really want to talk about it just yet. So giving people the time and space to access those healing resources on their own and go through their healing journey as they see fit is really, really important.
Sure. And so, if we kind of take a step back from an immediate disclosure, or if we are looking at maybe time after someone has disclosed, what is really important to support survivors is to check in with the people in your life who have identified themselves as survivors. By checking in, we can mean a variety of things, whether that's saying, like, hey, how are you doing? If something happened on the news, just saying, I love you, I'm here if you ever need to talk. That can be really helpful and important. Or being that friend of saying, like, making sure that you're taking care of yourself, making sure that you ate today. A great loved one, a great family member is always that friendly reminder, if not that kind of bee in your ear that reminds you to do self-care. It can be really important. And with that in mind, sometimes you need to check in with yourself as well during these times. It's really important that as much as you are supporting others, it's important to support yourself and practice your own self-care and be your own bee in your ear, if I'm going to use that analogy again. Make sure that you're taking care.
So I want to piggyback off of what Holly said really quick, because I think we can get super creative with checking in with people or just doing those self-care kind of things. So one thing we can do is if you know someone's really struggling to eat or struggling with eating, maybe they're feeling a little bit down, offering to come over and cook dinner with them. Or if it's social distancing in the age of COVID, we could FaceTime them or we could talk to them on Zoom and say, hey, let's make a meal together. Let's do like a bake off together. And just kind of being in those spaces and making it fun. So you're not exactly saying like, hey, did you eat today? Just checking in. You're making it kind of a little bit more discreet and something that's fun for the both of you. Art is a great way to do that too. If you like to paint, if you like to draw, doing that over FaceTime, or if you maybe live with this person and can do it in person, saying like, hey, you know what? I was thinking of going to Michael's, buying a canvas, and just painting the first thing that comes to my mind. Do you want to do that with me? And making it kind of a fun activity could be really helpful because you're not only taking care of yourself, but also checking in with that other person about self-care. And that's my last point to Holly's point. Sorry, jumping back into things. Another thing that we can do is model digital consent. I almost didn't get that word out. Digital consent. Sorry, a little bit of a tongue twister. So Holly and I covered this in one of our previous videos. If you're interested in learning more about it, jump back to that video. I think it was probably 1 or 2 videos ago to learn more about what digital consent is and how we can practice it. But doing that is super important, making sure that when we are checking in with people, if we do want to FaceTime, saying something like, hey, do you have a couple minutes to FaceTime? Or asking for consent, even though we're doing it in a digital space rather than in person, or in some instances we are, but making sure that we're continuing to practice digital consent is a great way to support the survivors of our lives.
Yeah. And so when we think about how to support survivors on a broader scale, if you are interested in getting involved and supporting or volunteering, we strongly encourage you to think about reaching out to your local agency or local crisis center or rape crisis sexual assault center. And so almost every county within Pennsylvania has their own rape crisis center, and the Pennsylvania as a whole, the state is what I was trying to say, has the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. And each agency or crisis center within the counties and the coalition have many opportunities for volunteering. They do fundraising events, they do social media campaigns, and these are amazing opportunities to volunteer and to really get involved and to show your support for survivors in a really broad and grand scale.
So hopefully you've all learned some helpful tips of how to support the survivors in your lives, or even people who might disclose to you down the line. Some things you can say, some things you can do, some ways to get involved. So we encourage you all to reference this video if you're ever needing some ideas or needing some information about ways to support people who have experienced sexual violence, and the survivors that you might already know, the survivors you might meet down the line. So thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we will see you all in the comments. Wink, wink, call.
Bye.